Welcome to the Young Dementia Network webinar. I was just pausing there so that we ticked over the over 100 attendees. That's lovely to see. I'm Tessa Guttridge, I'm chair of the network. And before I hand over to Rachel, Linda, Chris and Alison, I'm just going to remind you that you are not, dear attendees, on camera or mic. But we absolutely would love you to throw yourselves into the chat. And also, of course, during the session, add your question and your questions to the Q&A box so that because we'll leave a good chunk of time at the end to be able to respond to them. Don't wait till the last minute, otherwise your question won't come up. So enjoy the webinar. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about supporting autonomy. My goodness, with dementia or without, that's what we really hope to live with, don't we? So can I hand over to you, Rachel, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Tessa. So delighted to see so many of you appearing in the room today. Thank you for joining us this lunchtime. So we're going to talk to you about supporting the autonomy of people with young onset dementia. We're going to talk for about 40 minutes and then leave about 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. I'm Rachel Liverland. I work for a national community interest company called Innovations in Dementia. We work on a range of projects with people with dementia. Most importantly, that's the kind of the objective of the way we work. We work side by side with people with dementia. We also host the DEEP network, which is about 100 involvement groups of people with dementia across the UK, all kinds of groups, often peer support at the heart of them all. Before we start, could I just ask Chris and Alison to introduce themselves? We're going to hear from Linda in a moment, but I wonder, Alison, if you might just quickly say who you are.
Hi, I'm Alison. I live in Dundonald, which is in Northern Ireland, and was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2017, and it's lovely to be along this afternoon.
Thank you, Alison. And Chris?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Chris Norris. I live in Ashford in Kent, and I was diagnosed over 12 years ago now with frontal temporal dementia, and it's great to be here to have a chat with everybody.
Thank you, Chris. So we'll come back to Chris and Alison a little later. But as Tessa said, you know, autonomy and independence are cornerstones for how most of us want to live our lives. And that doesn't really change with the onset of dementia, but dementia can bring issues and impacts that do affect people's autonomy. So we're going to be exploring some ideas from research, but also some practical guides and resources that can support the autonomy of people with young onset dementia. So first of all, we're going to hear from Professor Linda Clare, and then Alison and Chris and myself will have a conversation about a co-produced resource called My Life, My Goals that emerged from one part of Linda's extensive research. So I've known Linda for 25 years, I worked out, Linda. And in all that time, I think you've been working around research that really centres on promoting wellbeing and autonomy for people with dementia. So I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Clare. I'm a professor at the University of Exeter Medical School. I'm a psychologist and health researcher. And as Rachel said, my research has focused around trying to improve the experience of living with dementia, or understanding how we can do that and what needs to happen. And it's been a great privilege to collaborate with Rachel and Innovations in Dementia through that time, and more recently with Alison and Chris, as you'll be hearing about later. I'm a researcher, so I'm going to start with the research perspective. I'm going to try to share my screen so that you can see my slides. This, I hope, will work. So I'm going to just reflect on how research can contribute to promoting autonomy, independence and choice when living with dementia. If you put the next slide up, Catherine. And I'm going to share learning from two research programmes. IDEAL, improving the experience of dementia and enhancing active life, and GREAT, goal-oriented cognitive rehabilitation, that Rachel and I have been involved in, and that where Alison and Chris have also contributed. So next slide, please. I want to start by paying tribute to this group, this wider group of people who've been involved in the IDEAL programme. This is the Always group, Action on Living Well, Asking You. They are our involvement group who've worked with us throughout the whole programme. Many of them stayed the 10, 11 years that it's run. It finished at the end of last year. And they've contributed and really been involved in co-producing a lot of the resources that I'm going to show you. And they've been instrumental in enabling us to do that. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just introduce some of what we tried to do in IDEAL. Don't be alarmed by this slide. We wanted to look at what really supports well-being when living with dementia, and to demonstrate how much that goes beyond the basics of perhaps having some medication if there is some available, perhaps managing difficult symptoms and so on. And we recruited over 1,500 people who are living with dementia, all types of dementia. More than 1 in 10 of them were under the age of 65, and the same amount again were between 66 and 69 years old, so probably diagnosed before the age of 65. So we feel that we did capture that experience, and about nearly 6% had frontotemporal dementia. So we included all types of dementia. And we really wanted to understand how many aspects of life influence well-being when living with dementia. And so we ended up with some quite complex statistical models, like the one you can see on the left of the screen. And we tried to translate them into something accessible, more accessible, and to understand that, like the one you can see on the right. And the pink bars there show how different aspects of life, different domains of life are linked with well-being. They show the strength of that link. So psychological characteristics and health, physical fitness and health, social situations, so that means things like where you live, the kind of area you live in, social resources, things like your social networks, the people who are around you to support you, and managing everyday life with dementia, how well you're able to manage those challenges that dementia brings every day. All of those things the pink bars show are important for well-being. And then the blue bars just show what happens when we let all those things compete with each other to see who's most important. And then the psychological aspect dominates. It doesn't mean the others aren't important. And we think that what it means is that physical health, social situations, social resources, and how you manage everyday challenges all contribute to your psychological state, which is, of course, very close to how you perceive your well-being and quality of life. So next slide, please. And from there, what we wanted to do was to turn all of that into a format that could be used by the people who decide on policies, who plan service provision, and who deliver services, and the practitioners who work directly with people with dementia and their families. And we created the Living with Dementia maps. We co-produced those, one for people with dementia and one for carers. And what they're designed to do is to show all those important aspects of life that have a bearing on well-being, and encourage people to think about that when they're planning and delivering services or working with people. And we also wanted to emphasize what makes a difference over time. So when we started, there was very little evidence about how would you know that you should be concerned that someone's well-being was going to decline. And we were able to show that if someone at a certain point is experiencing low mood or feeling hopeless or feeling lonely and isolated or feeling very badly about themselves, these are real important signs that that we need to do something now to support that person. It should be perhaps obvious, but here is the research evidence to show that and to encourage practitioners and services in their work. So next slide, please. So we thought a lot about how we can empower people with dementia and get these messages across in the IDEAL programme. And we identified 2 routes, really. One being the kind of public route. How do we give opportunities or in our research offer extra opportunities for people with dementia to have a voice and raise public awareness? And the other being a more personal level. How do we empower people in their own daily lives? So I'm going to start with the public awareness aspect. Next slide, please. One way we did that was through this arts-based project where we work with artists, people with dementia, family members, artists and researchers came together and co-produced. It turned into an amazing project. We started in a small way, really, and this particular group, Yorkshire Deep, were one of the first groups to engage with it. And they wanted to tackle the issue of getting out and about and the inaccessibility of public transport. And so they made a book you can see on the left of the screen, but they went beyond that and they decided to create a campaign banner, like a trade union banner or campaigning banner, a big banner that would really show that issue, and they could take that into the public arena. So here you can see the banner they created, showing on the reverse at the right top image, on the dark side, if you like, the difficulties getting out and about, incomprehensible timetables, lack of information, and so forth. And then on the other side, the main image in the middle, the red image, the joys and benefits of having a wonderful day out, and being able to unravel those complexities and get out and about. And they then took that banner to have a public unfurling on York railway station with a brass band to make their point and have their voice heard. Next slide, please. And that approach, then other groups picked that up and developed their own banners campaigning on the issues that they wanted to address. This was called the Unfurlings. We had an exhibition at the People's History Museum in Manchester in 2019, and then the banners went on tour. And there's also a book. I'll just explain a couple of the banners. So in the photograph with the banners, you can see the yellow one on the left. That was from the Budding Friends in Exeter, an allotment gardening group. And their campaigning message was the importance of friendship and social connections. So that was the main focus of their group and their work. And then the banner on the right from Kirklees Deep, they wanted to focus on how challenging it is to navigate the maze that's out there to try and get access to services and support that you need. And that was the topic of their banner that they wanted to campaign on. So lots of groups, and we had others that looked at things like making technology like cash points accessible and things like that. So lots of interesting different approaches that people wanted to take. Next slide, please. And another way we approached this was through theatre and drama, and again, very much a co-production. We people from the Always Group, researchers, theatre director Paul Japson, we worked together to produce an innovative play and documentary film. And you can see the artwork there in the middle. That was done by Willie Gilder, who lives with dementia. It's very striking. It was called The World Turned Upside Down. We wanted this to encourage us all to think about communication, how we can communicate. And we developed scenarios that might be familiar to people who, or whose family, someone in their family has had a diagnosis of dementia, starting to be worried about there might be a problem, going to the memory clinic, going to the doctor, making those difficult decisions about things like driving, and then managing some of the multiple challenges that can arise as dementia progresses. And so we developed those scenarios. In the original play, it was a forum theatre approach. So the scenarios were presented and then the audience had a chance to comment and suggest ways it might be done differently to get a more constructive outcome. And we made a film about the whole process of developing the play and then performing it. And that film has been quite widely viewed. We've had a number of public screenings, and all of them engender a lot of debate and discussion. And scenarios from the film, especially the doctor's appointment, as you can imagine, are being used in professional training, which is good to know. Next slide, please. And then the last thing I want to mention, and this was really a culmination of a lot of the work in Ideal, we had the opportunity to do a book sharing the findings from that 10-year programme about living with dementia. And that was published last month, Living with Dementia Reconsidered, in the Open University series. And this again was a co-production. So we had researchers write the chapters around, again, those topics that were at the core of Ideal about what supports well-being, what's important for well-being. And for each chapter, the Always group wrote a commentary, a reflection, and developed a manifesto point, the key thing they'd like to see happen or change that would improve the experience. And all of those points were developed into a call to action, a 10-point call to action, which is in the final chapter of the book. And if you don't have time to read books, we also have it in the form of a policy brief, which is 4 pages and easy to read. But of course, we like to recommend you the book as well. Next slide, please. So those are some of the ways that we can try to make a change through at the societal level. But of course, for everyone diagnosed with dementia, there's also the question of how that plays out in their own life at the individual level and within their family. So here I'd like to think about this aspect a bit. So could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So as part of Ideal, we developed, co-produced with a group of people with dementia, linking with the research team, and Rachel as the really core member, we produced the Living with Dementia toolkit. And again, this takes those domains that we found all important for living with dementia for well-being, and in each one comes up with some ideas and suggestions and resources to give people hope for living with the condition and perhaps inspire them to try something new or different, or just to feel somehow empowered by hearing about what other people have done and achieved and how they've managed and the experiences they've shared. So at least you're not alone. And that's been widely accessed internationally, and we're pleased to say also in the UK. So it's there for people to have a look at and use. Next slide, please. We also recently produced this resource, My Life Today, which very much focuses on, I think for each of us, the things that are important to our well-being are different. And often they're small things that happen day to day. And sometimes when we're not feeling so good, we don't do them as much. And then we feel the worse for that. And our idea here was just to try and think about how we reflect on those things that support our well-being on a daily basis. Could even be quite small things, a good cup of coffee in the morning or going out for a walk into nature. And trying to make sure that those things are still happening, or that if we find one thing difficult to do, we can think of something else that could compensate. So that's been evaluated by people with dementia and people who supported them to use it. And we hope to do some more work with that in the future. Next slide, please. And the other thing that's also in the Living with Dementia toolkit, but didn't directly arise from Ideal, but came from the great program of cognitive rehabilitation that I mentioned, is My Life, My Goals. And this was co-produced with an amazing group, which included Alison and Chris, and Rachel. And they took some of the ideas that we shared with them from the research and turned it into this resource for people living with dementia. That really takes those principles of rehabilitation and turns it into a great self-management or self-help guide. I'll come back to that in a moment, but the next slide, please. I just wondered if there's time. This is a very short 90-minute animation, if it will work. No, it's probably not going to work now because we're screen sharing. Okay.
It's 90 seconds, Linda, not
90 seconds, yeah, thank you. So I hope this is going to work. Let me see. I think it is.
I think we should hear volume, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
It is a lovely film.
Let me move on then. We can give you the link to the website for this. So I'll just explain. So cognitive rehabilitation is about finding those strategies and ways of managing things that are challenging in everyday life. It's not about, curing dementia or solving memory problems, but it's about how you get around them in everyday life to carry on doing the things that you want and love to do, either in the same way or perhaps in a slightly adapted way, and continue to be able to do those things and experience well-being as a result of those. And you can do that with a practitioner who's trained in that approach, but you can also do some things yourself. We all do this in our daily lives. I mean, for example, I'm wearing glasses because otherwise I wouldn't be able to see. You know, we will take a stick when we go walking if it might be slippery, to stop ourselves falling. We all do this kind of thing, and it's a real extension of that into a more focused approach to try to get around the, if you like, the disability that changes, in this case, changes in the brain are causing people when experiencing the developing dementia. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So rehabilitation, that's encapsulated in My Life, My Goals, is all about promoting autonomy, independence, and choice. And I've just put a couple of definitions here so you can see what I mean. The World Health Organization, it's about so that people with a health condition can remain as independent as possible and participate in education, work, and meaningful life roles. And the NICE guideline, our NICE guideline for dementia, identifying functional goals, that means goals that are relevant in everyday life, functional goals that are relevant to the person living with dementia, and working with them and their family members or carers to achieve these. The emphasis is on improving or maintaining functioning in everyday life, building on the person's strengths, and finding ways to compensate for impairments and supporting independence. So in our GREAT program, we trialed this approach to see how it benefited people with dementia, and we found that we know that we can enable people to, if we set goals together and we set sensible, realistic goals, we can enable people to attain those goals and to function better in the areas that are important to them in everyday life. We also know from research that there was a French study that showed that this approach does mean that people maintain their functioning for longer, over the longer term, and in fact will be it buys you at least 6 months of remaining at home. Essentially, that was the average they found. So and if you think about it, that's exactly the same as has been proposed for some of those new dementia drugs just brought in. Of course, that caused great excitement when we heard about those drugs, but the finding from the rehabilitation study was not much noticed. However, it's quite significant, I think. Next slide, please. So these are some, just a few quotes from people who participated in that program. The top line are people with dementia, the middle are family members, and the lower line are practitioners. So people with dementia told us things like, I've become more independent, and will go out on my own regularly. I've attempted volunteering in a charity shop and will now get shopping on my own. I've got more confidence, boosted my feelings about myself, more secure. And family members will say, realize it's a good outcome by realizing there are different strategies to manage the problems we face, which do help. Or somebody commented her mother had mastered using the washing machine and her mobile phone and had gained confidence. And professionals find that it is meaningful for people, and they think it's a powerful restorative experience. So next slide, please. So we co-developed resources for practitioners in this program, including 2 handbooks, and there is an e-learning course on the NHS Hub and also on our website. Next slide, please. And we then produced My Life, My Goals, which was, as I say, co-produced with a group of people living with dementia, some of whom are here today. And this was about translating those rehabilitation principles for people to use in their own life, either by themselves or perhaps with a family member. And we also know that some practitioners are using it. We know that services are stretched and often struggle to provide one-to-one interventions. But for example, our colleague Reinhard Guss in Oxley's Memory Services is using this and introducing people to it and supporting them to use it. So this is a good way of again, of making the most of what can be done where services are stretched. And this is what Rachel and Alison and Chris are going to talk more about, My Life, My Goals, in a moment. Next slide, please. And just before I finish, I just want to, still on this theme of rehabilitation, I just want to let you know that this has been picked up by Alzheimer's Disease International as something that's important for supporting and empowering people to remain as autonomous and independent as possible. And this is going to be the subject of this year's World Alzheimer Report, which will be launched on the 18th of September. So there's going to have a lot of information about rehabilitation, how it can be helpful, how it's done, what people themselves can do, and so on. So I would encourage you to look out for that. And you will find My Life, My Goals mentioned in there. Last slide, please. Thank you. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone who contributed, and I'm going to hand over back to Rachel now.
Thank you so much, Linda. I know we'll come back round to your presentation in the Q&A, but it's a perfect link to myself and Alison and Chris talking now about My Life, My Goals. Catherine, would you just be willing to share you anticipated? Thank you. I just wanted to give you a really quick flavour of My Life, My Goals before we start talking, just because many of you may not have seen them. So Linda's described it. It's a self-management resource for people with dementia, co-created with people with dementia and the research team, translating the research around cognitive rehabilitation into something that people with dementia could pick up themselves and use to promote their autonomy, independence and choice. And Alison will probably say something amazing as well today, but I love this quote from Alison. It's my life, it's not your life, it's my life. It's the goals I want to set and the goals I want to achieve. Next slide, please, Catherine. So there's a whole range of content, and all of this content we had to learn about cognitive rehabilitation and translate that into something that was usable by people with dementia. So to understand what goals even are, to make some simple changes in your life, get rid of your stress, leave the stress behind, put yourself in the right position to be able to take this approach in life. There's lots of ideas about the methods and an action plan. Also solutions and strategies when it's not going according to plan, and what you might do to carry on with this approach, but recognizing some of the obstacles that people come up against. Next slide, please. So it's full of techniques to work around the document. It's full of colour. If you have a look, the link is in the chat box. If you have a look, you'll see that you can click around it on the online version and click into films to watch inspiring films, click forward into future content if you don't want to read the early content, click back to remind yourself what you read, and there's these symbols that kind of take you forward and give you some cues as to tasks you might do or things you might record for yourselves. Next slide, please. Little stories from people with dementia about what this means in life. Goal setting is quite an unusual term for people to apply in their own lives, so it's kind of getting that feel for what this means and how it doesn't have to be really big goals. In fact, they should be SMART goals, and so that includes achievable. So for Roy, it was sitting outside the front of his house and interacting with the people who go by, and that was his goal, and that was what he achieved. And final slide, I think now, Catherine. And as an action plan, so people can kind of take that learning, apply it in their lives. And if you look on the website, you should be able to download the action plan separately from the booklet. I do have a few print copies. It's also an online interactive resource. So if you do want to contact me to have a look at the print copies, I could probably send a few out. And before we go to our conversation, just an appeal. If you've come across My Life, My Goals, if you've used it as a professional with people with dementia, or if you've used it as a person with dementia, or you're a family carer who's had a look at it, I'm currently finishing a piece of research with Exeter University evaluating people's experiences of My Life, My Goals, and I have 2 more weeks in which to collect my data. So I would love for people who've seen it to be involved if you're interested, and I'll put my contact details in the chat box. I think the slides are done now, Catherine. Thank you. I'm hoping Chris and Alison are still here. Hello, Chris. Hello.
Yes, I'm still here. Can't get rid of me that easily.
So we've got about 15 minutes or so to have our conversation, and then we'll open it up to question and answers more generally. You were both co-authors of in the team that co-created My Life, My Goals. We'll talk a little bit about My Life, My Goals in a moment, perhaps in more detail. But just to start, I wondered, this whole webinar is about autonomy. Autonomy is perhaps at the heart of My Life, My Goals as well. What does that word even mean to you?
Well, what it means to me is being able to carry on doing things as much as possible, and it's great to have help from your supporter or your carer, but it's also great to carry on and feel valued and valuable still in this world. And sometimes with dementia, you can feel that you've become devalued a little bit. I have a phrase that I always tout about, that dementia comes in cans. You can't buy it in the shop, but you've got to focus on the things you can still do, and it is possible with help to do those things, and it gives hope for the future. And I mean, we didn't like the word rehabilitation. That sounds like your brain's some kind of criminal and needs to be sent off to to Borstal for a while, which is not a bad idea, just sending dementia away. So that's how we came up with My Life, My Goals, because we felt it was more livable. Plus, these times it's very difficult now with a shortage of professionals for them to be able to do it. And so providing something that you could do with your husband, your wife, your partner, your carer, your next door neighbor, the cat that lives next, you could sit down and work out a process forward. So autonomy is very important to me, and has been for since in the 12 years since I've been diagnosed. Alison.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no, as I say, for me, it is the right to make my own decisions. The right to control my actions. And not have somebody else controlling me and thinking they know what's best for me. Being able to, as I say, just really having control, and that all comes, gives you independence. It helps your confidence. And it still is so vitally important to be able to make decisions that are about you and about being listened to, rather than people on the outside thinking, oh, now there's a dementia diagnosis in the mix, I have to make all the decisions for Alison, or I have to make all the decisions for Chris. You have to allow us still with support in certain situations, and we acknowledge that we need that more and more, but still to be able to do it. And for me, My Life, My Goals is just all about giving people hope. When they read that, when they see that, and the way it is broke up in different sections, people can take it at their own sort of pace and with a bit of support if needed. But it doesn't have to be, as you said earlier, Rachel, huge goals. It can be something really simple, but very achievable, that makes you feel really good about yourself, that you've actually achieved that, rather than setting something that's totally out of the water, that's only going to disappoint you because you're not going to achieve it.
Yeah, thanks, Alison.
There's very much a feeling of that people will say to you, well, you can't be doing that anymore.
Yeah.
It's not possible for you to do it anymore. What it does, it takes your life away from you. And we're firm believers that you don't die when you get dementia. You can still do things with the help of somebody else. So you might not be able to cook the dinner. Not that I've ever been able to really do that very well anyway, but you can still achieve, even if it means just stirring the gravy, you've still got a meaning in your life. And dementia takes so much away from you anyway. And then for somebody else to come along and say, well, you can't do that anymore. There, dearie, pat you on the head. it's not the way to go. I don't. I'm not a cat. I don't like being patted on the head. I like to just get stuck in. Now there does come a point where you have to say, well, I've given that a good hard try. And we've tried to look at all the various strategies, which is what my life, my goals is about. Perhaps it is a day to step backwards. I mean, music-wise, I've been involved in music for 60 years. But I came to the conclusion in March this year that it was causing me more pain and anguish to try and carry on doing what I was doing with my music than it was to just step away from it. I've now stepped away from it after 60 years. I mean, I miss it desperately because it's been a part of my life for so long. But there comes a point, but that point is a long way down the line before you've tried everything else. Sorry, we're dragging you off in all sorts of directions.
No, it's a really relevant, Chris. And I'm wondering, I'm going to jump ahead actually, because I think it was something that you've both said about what the knock-on effect really of something like my life, my goals might be on other people who maybe don't view you as having autonomy or want to. I think, Alison, you've said in the past about kind of being kind of popped into cotton wool and or not being enabled to take risks or do the things that you want to do in life. Do you think something like My Life, My Goals has got the potential, I guess, to change what other people think about dementia?
I do really, particularly if you do that along with the person who you're living with or who sort of will be in your life the most, and making them sort of see, what it is you want to do. And as I say, I'm a real firm believer in people not presuming they know what I need or want, but to ask me. Nothing frustrates me more than when somebody makes a decision for me without consulting me to see if that is what I sort of want. And like Chris, there's things that you have to sort of acknowledge that no matter whatever amount of support, that is no longer right and can cause more anxiety than what it did before. But there's other things. For me, cooking is vitally important, but I've had to put into place steps to enable me to still continue to do that. But I think if you don't have other people on board to do that, then people would say, no, I'll do that. You go and sit down, and it just removes everything from you. Having said that, I would love every so often if my husband took it into his head and think, I'll cook dinner tonight. But the chances of that happening are non-existent.
There's a theme emerging here about
But at the same time, it is something that I love doing and it's something that's important. So I have found ways. But I can no longer just go and cook something, even something that I have cooked for years and years and years. I need to have them steps in place to make that be able to happen. But yes, sorry, Rachel, your question. I do think it does help others. I genuinely do believe that.
So go on, Chris.
I was going to say I'm not really that clever on a computer. But my son is. I mean, he's got a Microsoft degree and all that sort of thing. And we were, and I was forever calling him and saying, "Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that?" And he would tell me what I needed to do, and then he'd go away, and then I'd call him back 10 minutes later to say, "Look, I can't do it. I'm completely lost." Or how do you do this? He said, "Dad, I didn't actually tell you 10 minutes ago how you can go about it." So it was apparent that we needed to work out some kind of plan. And I mean, he still helps me just as much. But what the first thing he does do, which we agreed, was, "But Dad, how would you like me to help you? Would you like me to talk you through it and help you do it? Or would you?" And I could see, tries his mind, I could see the frustration on his face sometimes, thinking, goodness sake, that is so simple. But, sometimes things aren't simple. So, but he now asks, "Would you like me to help you, or would you like me to do that bit for you?" And I still have that choice, that autonomy to say, "Look, yes, I'd like your help." But more and more often, actually, it's quicker for me to say, yes, Drew, if you could just do that, and Drew, could you do this?
Yeah.
And I I no longer have that challenge of thinking that I'm unworthy, that I just can't do it myself,
Yeah.
because so that's what it's about, helping people find their way through that those difficulties. And that's what that to me is a good example of him. He asks me which way would we like to do it,
Yeah.
and then he helps me to do it.
Yeah.
Or does it for me. And I really don't mind him doing those bits for me, really, because I mean I sit there and watch the cursor going around the screen and walk factor 5, and I think, that would have taken me an hour to do that, and he does it in 30 seconds. So,
But the important thing is, Chris, you are asked, do you want me to do that? So you still have the control sort of that. And I think that is the difference than your son just pushing you to the side and doing it.
Yep.
But for him to ask, Dad, what way do you want me to do this? That's just perfect.
Yeah.
I'm really struck by that word about control, Alison, about having control in your own life. And did you just say the word unworthy, Chris? Because that really struck me as a memory of when we were putting the booklet together, of the ways that all the authors, I think there were 8 or 9 people with dementia as authors on this booklet, that actually the description that everybody had about these feelings that you have post-diagnosis, and how you'd really hoped there could have been something like if something like My Life, My Goals had existed, it could have pulled you away from those sentiments about describing yourself or feeling a certain way. Perhaps you still, but gives you a kind of mechanism by which to almost pull yourself out of black hole that I think it was you, Alison, used to describe.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. You get so much bump whenever you're diagnosed, and I don't think 90% of it you even sort of look at or read, because it's all by professionals or by people who know what you need or what you should be doing. And if you got something like My Life, My Goals, which is wrote by people who have a dementia diagnosis, even that in itself gives you the drive and you can see that you can still continue to live.
Yeah.
And that alongside the Living with Dementia toolkit.
It is, yeah.
You can, and what's good about these two things is you can click on the videos, and it's not words on a piece of paper. It's actually real people. And you're dead right, Alison, that you see other people thinking, and you think, well, I mean, sometimes people said to me, what inspired me about Chris is I looked at him and I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yes.
And I didn't take that as an insult. I took that as a great smashing, and that's what it's all about, is giving people that hope and that realization that they are still as important as they were in their life and in this world as they were before. And that's because take that away from somebody, like sometimes people do. Well, you've only got to look at Wendy Mitchell's example of when she's living on her own, and her daughter kept helping her on with her coat all the time. And one day she said to her daughter, "Look, it's brilliant that you're helping me every time to put my coat on. But honestly, if you don't let me try and struggle myself, so I'll have to call you around every time I want to go out and put my coat on. I'll have to ring you up and get you to come around." And so they put into place that strategy where Wendy said, "But if I'm in a right old pickle, then I will give you a call. But please let me try to put my coat on." And so, I mean, that may well sound like a simple thing to people. I just want to do a little experiment. I'm sorry it might take time. I'd ask everybody to cross their arms in the audience, and we won't see whether you're doing it. And that was dead easy, wasn't it? Really, really easy. Now uncross your arms. and now cross your arms the other way. And that's what it's like living with dementia sometimes. You know, it takes us longer to do the things which were used to be simple before. Sorry. Oh, I see. Tessa's popped up.
Tessa's popped up. So I think we're allowed just to conclude. Thank you, Chris and Alison, so much for all those insights into autonomy, but also my life, my goals. Just wondered, as a closing sentence from you, what was it like being involved? What was it like doing this work on my life, my goals, helping to co-create it?
Amazing. It's one piece of work I'm extremely proud of, you know, because I know what it means to me, and I just hope others looking at it and using it will get as much out of it as we got out of producing it. And if it helps one person, then that's brilliant. And as Chris says, if somebody can look at you and say, well, if they can do it, then I can do it. And that isn't an insult to our intelligence. That's giving them the hope to and the confidence to use their voice to say, I have the right to make this decision.
It was very inspiring, and particularly to hear the fellow people that were doing it alongside you, and you just couldn't help but be dragged along and say,
yes,
this is it's better than, you know, bread or whatever they call it. It's better than that. It's far better than that. And come out the other end, and suddenly you think, well, we've gone from cognitive rehabilitation, which
yes,
there's something that's alive, and it's, you know, and it's alive just as you are.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Better than bread. That's the quote that's going to go on the next
sliced bread.
Yes.
Better than sliced bread.
Thank you so much, Chris and Alison. So I think we're back to Tessa now.
Yes, thank you very much, Rachel, Chris and Alison. People were putting so many messages about really appreciating Chris and Alison's contribution, how powerful and how determined, and that we needed to hear a little more, I felt. So I hope that's okay with everybody. I'm going to ask a few questions now. Do you work, or have you had experience of working with adults with learning disabilities and with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease? Can we have a response to that from somebody?
I do in the past. I have worked with people with learning disabilities in the past, and a very small number of people who have had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, but some time ago, not recently.
And we've worked with McIntyre, who are a learning disability charity, and have had a dementia programme for quite a long time. And the lovely woman who lives in a McIntyre supported housing, I think, who has Down syndrome, has led their dementia project with a worker there, and recently, in the last kind of couple of years, 18 months or so, developed dementia herself. And I'm going to have a little hunt, because there'll be a lovely film with her in it that we hosted for our deep 10-year anniversary.
So do you mean you'll have a hunt and we can put it as a link? Fabulous. There are just so many really useful links to resources and the site and the research that we're going to be sending out on Friday. Somebody's asked about ordering the leaflets or downloading them. Is that possible? And it was for Linda.
Sorry, I'm not sure which leaflets you mean.
There are the Living Well maps.
Yeah, so they're on our website. I think I had the details at the end of the slides. If you get stuck with that, you feel free to email and I can point you in the right direction. So the Living Well maps and various other resources are all available there. And there are some other resources on the GREAT website too, but I think the ideal one is probably one you mean.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Question for Chris. Is there a local forum or group around the Canterbury, Kent area for frontal lobe dementia? Do you know?
Chris, you're on mute.
Isn't it funny to see people's mouths moving but not hear the words? There isn't a specific group for FTD, but there is a group that is run by rarer dementia organisation. But on the back of that, there is a group of the East Kent forget-me-nots are people who are living with dementia, and they're an activation group, activist group, and they meet once a month. Maybe somebody can put that in. I was trying to do your reply to you, but I couldn't do the reply to you, unfortunately, without going to everybody else.
Thank you. Somebody's asked about young onset starting age. So it's defined as symptoms developing under the age of 65.
It's being diagnosed under the age of 65 is young onset.
So it's quite arbitrary, and of course, actually, the experience of people is very different, and different diagnoses, different types of dementia. But that's it really. I think that's the consensus opinion. At what stage of diagnosis would you recommend these be applied? So I'm assuming the tools that have been, the resources and such like. Is it something you've studied regarding the difference in effectiveness depending on the age and the progression of dementia?
I think it's very important to start it as early as you can, really, because if you can form habits, then you can carry those habits forward. If you delay it and say, "Oh right, I'll leave it until the person's in the later stages," then it's probably not going to work quite so well, because you haven't got that to and fro that you've got when the person is less confused.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think really the earlier the better to be introduced, and then if the person's not quite ready for it, then at least it's sort of in the pipeline. But I think maybe I'm wrong, Rachel, but I think wasn't there some talk about some people that maybe this wouldn't work for, whatever, and I think the consensus was, well, again, why make that decision? You know, why exclude a group of people because we think it's not going to work, because it might work on a different level or parts of it might work. But I think the earlier it's introduced, but maybe I'm making that up. I am not sure.
I think you make really good points, Alison. And so that's what we're evaluating at the moment with My Life, My Goals. Is there a kind of idea of when it is best introduced? And I don't think age necessarily makes a difference, but maybe stage of dementia does. But we also thought that perhaps, well, certainly when we were co-producing it, that not necessarily at the point of diagnosis, but maybe some months later.
Yes.
Linda may have some things to say from the research.
No, and I agree entirely. But I think also, you know, everyone is so different. And as Alison said, you know, you get given a lot of leaflets and information, and some of them are relevant and some of them aren't. And I think what we want to do is make sure there are these resources there that people can access and that people know about them, so they can make their own choices about what's going to work for them at what time. If you don't know about them and or they're not there at all, or they are there and you don't know about them, that's not going to be helpful. But I think we want to make sure that people know these options are there.
Yeah.
You know,
there's one of
the only thing.
One of the members in the Dementia and I group that I'm involved in says it's useful to have things in your back pocket so that when you need them, it's there. You know, it's ready to be used. Whether you use it today, tomorrow, or next month, it doesn't matter. But you have it there, and it's accessible.
So true. So we've had a couple of more questions in terms of finding local groups. So I'm sure Kate, I can't see the chat, but I'm sure Kate will put the link to Dementia UK to find support, because that's a good place to look for local groups and such like. Are there any resources or ideas for supporting individuals with young onset dementia in care homes to maintain autonomy? That's a question, but also a comment from Julie was around the importance of these resources when you're living alone. You know, and to be able to use them, to have those things to use yourself, but also to share with other people. So let's track back to the care homes and maintaining.
Could I just pick up on living alone, Tessa, because I just want to say this is something we've been working on recently, and we just checked in England and we discovered that in 2023 40% of people with dementia were living alone. Of people with dementia in the community, not including people who might be in care homes, so nearly half. And it's really, really important and extra important. Obviously their needs are different and they need and it's a big source of inequality, I think, in terms of the support that people can access. And so I think having resources for people living alone is really vital. That's something we want to see increasing as well. Sorry. And care homes, I can't comment on. I don't have anything specific on that.
Well, I guess just to maybe comment on care homes is like what potential there would be to develop resources or to adapt resources.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of principles and learning and a lot of the things that Linda has shared, and certainly my life, my goals. And, with that support of perhaps, kind of very scaffolded support from somebody else that really gets it, like a worker or a family member, what potential there could be.
I think Linda, we're 1 minute off finishing, so if you could make it.
World Alzheimer Report will include care homes and this kind of rehabilitation approach for people in care homes. There is evidence about it, not something I've personally researched, so just want to make that clear. Well, it is there.
Okay, lovely. Well, I'm going to thank you, Alison, Chris, Linda and Rachel, very much indeed for your contributions today.
Thank you.
There's some brilliant resources out there, but listening to sort of personal experience is just so powerful as well. So thank you very much. I want to tell you about the next webinars. I'll tell you as much as I can. So they're October, November. We have a little break over summer, and they're going to focus on young onset dementia and social care support, recommendations and resources to meet people with young onset dementias needs better. So that's from the dynamic study. So we're going to be putting information about those webinars in the July-August summer issue of Young Dementia Network News. So check it out there and register for those webinars. I also wanted to say that if you're not a member of the Young Dementia Network, please do join. You'll be really very welcome, and you will not be overwhelmed with lots of comms that you really are not interested in. You'll get some really good stuff from us. Apart from that, thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and have a good summer.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.